50 different perspectives and stories on gratitude, this book captures what most books don't. The secret sauce is in the number of voices and stories where you'll be sure to find a personal connection to so many as I did. A really excellent book, David Freeman. Found exclusively on Amazon.com.
Hi, I'm Chris, and this is Gratitude Space Radio. Welcome, welcome. Well, we've got a lot of people here today. Actually, I believe this is the most I've ever done a live stream with, so I'm very excited here. I want to just go ahead and introduce my co-host, Mr. Peter Williams. Good morning, Peter.
Good evening, Chris. It's morning Hong Kong, evening US, so thanks for hosting another experiment in this series of podcasts.
Oh, for sure, man. I'm excited. The more the merrier. I always enjoy meeting your friends. And now the great thing is I'm meeting friends of friends. We're doing this like cascading thing, which is exciting. Yes.
Yeah, I love the compounding. It's good fun. So a bit of context. I met you through a random series of connections. Gratitude and Pasta was a virtual dinner series that I attended. A few weeks later, I invited a friend, another Chris, Texan living in Taipei, and he did a walking tour of his neighborhood. The following week, I thought, that worked out pretty well. How about I go and do a walking tour of my neighborhood? And halfway through that, we got introduced via email, where another Chris in New York said, "Chris, meet Peter," and that was it. And we started this conversation. I was writing a book, you were writing a book, and this serendipity series of adventures kept on evolving. You interviewed me for a podcast. Then I said, well, I've got a lot of people that I featured in my book. We could bring them on sort of one at a time and start a conversation. And last week, I think it was a week or two ago, we spoke to Oskar, who has just published his book, Dear Hong Kong. And today we're bringing in one of the first people that is featured in that book, which is, featuring 80 people from different countries that are living in Hong Kong. So today we've got Phyllis and her daughter Alia to talk about their amazing project and work at Mother's Choice. So I'm going to pause there, and maybe you can bring on Oskar, and he can fill in some of the gaps.
Well, real quick, I wanted you to just plug your book, bro.
Yeah. So my book is just too many adventures happened over the last 10 years living in Hong Kong. And I wanted to capture those. And Productive Accidents is the title. It refers to an idea that a business school professor taught us when I finished at the University of Chicago about 10 years ago. He'd gone back 100 years and looked at how does innovation happen. And he basically boiled people into two different categories: people that operated in silos, kind of closed networks. And maybe in a work situation, they might just hang around their cubicle. They might know their company, their department, their industry, but they don't really reach beyond that. And, those people are good at executing and optimizing, but maybe if you ask them to reinvent their industry, they'll probably struggle. So the alternative is to have an open network and to be the bridge between lots of different personalities and locations and industries and mindsets. And that's where a lot of magic starts to happen, these productive accidents or serendipity. And he boiled all his research down into that single phrase: put yourself at risk of productive accident. And today is a continuation of that mindset. We're going to start some conversations here that might turn into another connection or collaboration or a new series of ideas that we wouldn't have been able to come up with individually. But the more we play with this idea and be experimental, the more good things start to happen. So hopefully that's going to prompt some ideas from Phyllis and Alia in terms of their journey, because I'm sure there's been some luck and chance and serendipity along the way that maybe they can share with us today.
Sounds great. Let's go ahead and bring Oskar on. Oskar, hey, buddy. There you are.
Hello, good morning. How are you?
Good. Welcome. Happy to be here, man. It was last Sunday morning, so it was about a week ago we were all together.
Yeah, very good.
Yeah, and we're all here again.
Your morning and your evening. So
yeah,
and see the sun rising here and the sun setting there is good.
Yeah, for sure. Well, thanks for you. Before we bring on your guests, I'd love for you to share a little bit more about your book, and I even got a little image I made too. So
So, I mean, a couple of years back, I started working on this project, Dear Hong Kong. So, bringing the stories and portraits of very inspiring people, actually the most inspiring people from every country in the world that live in Hong Kong, because we believe that one of the beautiful things about Hong Kong is the diversity, and we want to promote that within the society. So, it's a non-profit project to try to bring this awareness into the more local society in Hong Kong and bridge this gap between the foreign and the local communities. So I've been delighted to be working on this, meeting amazing people along the way. So people that are in this podcast and many others. I met Peter at the Creative Mornings and say, who is this guy? He's talking about this idea of productive accidents and finding new opportunities in connections with people and ideas and sharing that. I think that's what it's all about. And I mean, we have been asking around, like, who is the most inspiring person from a different place? So I think, I mean, the US is a big country, is very much represented in Hong Kong. So, but for us, it was like very obvious to have Phyllis as founder of Mother's Choice. And today we're lucky to have Ali as well, the CEO of the organization. So I'm super excited to talk to them.
Awesome. Well, let's go ahead and bring them on then. Here we go. Hey, we're all here.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Good morning. So, Oskar, do you want to? I mean, can you express to how, or Phyllis, would you like to talk about maybe the first time you met Oskar or how that connection came about?
Oskar, do you remember? It was certainly an accident that we got to meet each other. It was during the protests.
Yes.
That's the first time I met you. And we were having coffee and everybody was running around and running out of the building. And that was my first meeting with Oskar.
Oh, wow.
At the time, I think it was 6 o'clock and suddenly the shopping mall closed because of the protest or something. And we had to run away or something. And I think that the interview was like a half cut in the middle. And then we met again to finish it. And yeah, very exciting times.
It was an exciting time. Yeah.
But even before that, before you arranged that interview, how did you connect?
Well, I think we got in touch directly with you. I mean, because we knew, well, I mean, I started the project with my colleague Eggy and see, I mean, you should have seen her face when I told her, like, okay, we're going to try to interview the founder of Mother's Choice, because for her, as a local girl here, she was so aware of the organization, but she didn't have a clue who was behind. And so, yeah, she was super excited. I think, Phyllis, you could feel it when we met you for the first time. And yeah, that was very good. And then we had a series of conversations afterwards. And I think, like with the majority of people we interviewed for the book, we became friends, which is a very good thing.
Yes. Yeah. Well, if
For
you're
people
talking
who have
about
never heard of Mother's Choice, maybe Alia can go into her CEO role and give us the elevator pitch.
Sure. Well, Mother's Choice is very much a local charity here in Hong Kong, which is probably, Oskar, why your colleague was surprised to learn that there were people from different countries behind the organization, since we very much serve local babies and children here in Hong Kong. But our focus is really on babies and children who don't have families, who are in the residential care system, as well as very young pregnant teenagers, often who have grown up in the residential care system themselves. And our vision is to see every child, every young girl grow up in a safe, loving, and permanent family. And it's our belief that when children grow up knowing that they're loved in a safe and forever family, that is something that can totally transform a community, that it changes a city for everybody who lives there.
Yeah. Amazing. And it started when? How many years ago?
Yeah, so Mother's Choice started 34 years ago now. Actually, the idea came about 35 years ago when there was a series of articles in the newspaper about the plight of young women who were facing crisis pregnancy and how they were treated by our community. And that's really sort of the productive accident behind Mother's Choice, is that it was actually this series of articles made the front page of the newspaper here in Hong Kong. And the details were so gruesome and so shocking that everybody in the city was talking about it. This is back in 1986. But I think the totally radical thing about Mother's Choice is there were two couples who were from different countries, from the United States and from India, who read it, who were upset about it, but had this, I don't know, I guess a little bit of crazy courage after discussing it. Instead of saying, why doesn't somebody do something about this? Why don't they or the government or somebody do something? They had the courage to ask themselves, wow, this is really terrible. What can we do about it? Even though we don't really speak the local language very well, you know, we don't necessarily have the right experience, so we don't have access to the right resources, we don't have money, we have young kids, we don't have time, but they were willing to say, what can I do? And that led to a whole series of productive accidents where their friends and family members and volunteers across the community came together to say, we want to start Mother's Choice. And that was 34 years ago. And you know, we've helped actually hundreds of thousands of young women and children and vulnerable families in our city. And I just think we're still very much a volunteer organization. 80% of our workforce is volunteer. And I just think there are people from, you know, almost every country on the planet who've served as volunteers here. And I think that's really been our strength. You know, it's having perspectives and experience and real professional experiences too, you know, in child development, in adolescent medicine, in attachment theory, trauma, you know, really people from all over the world with all different experiences coming together and making a significant difference in the lives of the most vulnerable children in our city. So I think, you know, we're sort of the walking experience of productive accidents, and also how the diversity of our city in Hong Kong has really been our strength.
The interesting thing is our purpose is to change people's lives and give second chances. And as we have all of these volunteers, I quite often say, why did you come to Mother's Choice? How do you feel about it? How do you feel about volunteering? And they always say, well, I thought I was a really good person and I was going to help. But they say, I'm the person that gets helped, because the more I give, the more I get. And the more I realize that I'm able to change my community, and I'm able to change the attitudes towards adoption or young single pregnant girls. So it's been a real surprise for us that you always get more than you can give.
What were some of the big milestones, right, when you first started out, and how did you come up with the name, and just, you know, some of the big memories that you have along the way?
Yeah, so how we came up with the name was my friend that had invited me over for coffee the morning that newspaper article came out, told me her own personal story of her sister who was very young and got pregnant, and how she was sent away, and how the parents never even mentioned her name for over a year. And after she came back and my friend said to her sister, where were you and what happened? She found out that her sister had had a baby, and her sister was so sad, and the baby was taken away. And she said to me about the article, after reading the article, she said, my sister would not have chosen this. What happened to her? My sister would have loved having her baby. And her sister actually died months later because she refused to eat. So that's where Mother's Choice came in. We said that we would not be judgmental, we would help anybody who needed help. And so that's the premise with which Mother's Choice started. Much to our surprise, these two couples got on the front page of the newspaper that next day. And they said, there's a group of people who are willing to help any pregnant girl that needs help. And at 9 o'clock that morning, we got our first call. It was from a nurse that was in the hospital That evening, the evening before, a social worker was in a study room in one of the housing estates. And as she was closing up for the evening, she found a really young girl hiding under a desk. And she was very pregnant. And she was trying to find a safe place to sleep. The social worker didn't know what to do with her, so she got her in a taxi and left her at the local hospital. And of course, we'd been in the hospital in emergency at night. We know what a lonely place that is and what it's like. And so the next morning, there was a nurse going on her way to work, reading the newspaper, and she saw that there was this article about these people who were willing to help pregnant girls. She went into work and they were having a meeting, handing over night staff to the morning staff. And they said, this girl is very young, she's very pregnant, she won't talk, she won't say what her name is or where she came from, but she can't stay here because she's not sick. So the girl had just been waiting in the emergency ward all this time. And so the nurse said, I just read this article about these people who are willing to help pregnant girls. So they called us on the phone at 9 that morning and said, we have a girl, would you come and get her? We were totally shocked. We were not prepared. We didn't have, the experience. It was just an idea. And we had our first girl on the first day.
And where are they now?
Yes, my friend made a cot for her in their house. And the next morning, as they knocked on the door to ask her if she wanted something to eat, the girl was having her baby. So the second day, we had our first baby. Taken to the hospital, we went to visit the baby, and we said to the nurse, what's going to happen to the baby? And she said the baby would go into a local orphanage. So my friend and I said, we didn't know there were local orphanages. And so we said, what are the names? And we went to visit, and we got back and we said, no way, we're going to have to keep our babies. So everything happened within a couple of days. All the decisions that we made happened like really quickly.
So that child is now 34 in Hong Kong? And you're still in touch?
We don't know. I never kept track of that girl or the baby because we were too inexperienced to realize that we need to do that. But I do work with adult adoptees who are in their 30s. We have a group that meet once a month. The oldest one is 75 years old, not adopted from Mother's Choice, but we get many Mother's Choice babies come back. That allows them just to talk about their experiences and help each other. And it's the best thing that I do.
Amazing.
Yeah.
And you've got a big family yourself, Phyllis, right? I want to maybe dig into that, because that's how I met you guys, through Complete Productive Accident. Maybe we can talk about later, but it was just ridiculous how to me and how it sort of happened. And then to discover another connection through that conversation, which is through Shafan, your son, who's on the board of Resolve Foundation. And I'd never even met you guys, but I just happened to grab the only empty seat under that marquee at a golf event. And I sat down and, had a chat and discovered you were connected to Mother's Choice. And then somehow, I don't know how we discovered that, Shafan was on Resolve and how we started talking about that. But to me, that's crazy. I didn't know that Shafan was from such a big family. And then I don't know if it was at that time or when we had lunch earlier with my daughter Sarah, and you started talking about your 6 children and how you met your husband. And we've got to go into that at some stage, because you've got to turn that into a movie. There's no doubt.
I want to hear that, please. How'd you meet your husband?
Our whole family is a series of productive accidents. So my mom is the mom of 7 kids. I'm the eldest of 7 kids. She met my dad actually on the Star Ferry. So, that was such a miracle story, how our family got started. And then, of course, how Mother's Choice got started. And even how I met my husband is pretty crazy. I met him at a wedding in Ireland, my very first time in Ireland. He's Irish, but grew up in Africa. And
you were in town from New York or something, right? So it was totally even that.
I was living in New York at the time, and so his childhood best friend married one of my childhood best friends, and we met at the wedding, and he somehow convinced me to go to dinner with him the next night in London, which is where I was flying through on my way back, and then somehow convinced me at dinner to go straight to the airport with him and fly to Spain. So that he didn't mention that he was going there on holiday with his whole family. So I ended up meeting the family on my first date. By the end of a few days in Spain, you know, he said, I think I need to meet your family now too. So we had a very whirlwind courtship, and we got engaged after only a few months, and we got married less than a year after we met. We didn't live in the same country until a few months after we got married, but we moved back to Hong Kong, I guess, about 12 and a half years ago now. And I was practicing as a lawyer. So never in a million years, even though I grew up with Mother's Choice, and my 6 younger siblings and I all volunteered at Mother's Choice growing up and watched our parents and their friends go through this journey of having the courage to respond to a crisis in their own community, even though they didn't have the right CV. You know, I wanted to help as a volunteer, but I never in a million years saw myself as working here full time. I mean, I was busy as an M&A lawyer, but you know, I had one of those kind of critical light bulb moments in my own life a few years after moving back to Hong Kong and realizing this is really a calling for me. And you know, you mentioned my brother Peter, but all of my siblings and I are really passionate about giving back to our community. I think just watching the example of my parents, and you know, I'm realizing that I have a calling on my life too, and my calling is really to family, not just my 6 kids and my husband or my mom and my siblings, but you know, I think the mission of Mother's Choice is really redefining what family is for our city and for our community, and recognizing that family is not just a biological connection, but family is really defined by love and commitment. And we want to change the way that people think about family. And that if the people that we see when we are walking down the street, when we get on the bus, when we go into the subway, when we're sitting in the coffee shop, if we can see that everybody in our city is our brother and our sister, our mother and our father, our child, if we change our definition of family, actually our city can be transformed. Yes. Our favorite quote is the Mother Teresa. She said, the problem with the world is that we draw the circle of our family too small. And I think that really speaks not just to the mission of Mother's Choice, but I think to our personal mission in our family as really, how can we see everybody who's vulnerable, who's hurting, who needs help as our own family member in our city.
Great.
And thinking about my own children, I think a lot about legacy. What legacy do you leave when you're alive, right? Every day we're writing a chapter of our own book. And for me, the legacy that I got from my parents was to help the community too. My father worked with the poor all of his life, and they were experts at hospitality and bringing people in. And we called people aunts and uncles that weren't related to us, and passing that down. We lead that with our children and our friends too, by being personal examples. And I think that that's what my parents did for me, and hopefully I did for my kids as well.
Where did you grow up, Phyllis?
I grew up in Taos, New Mexico. We were the only white family in our little town. So I grew up with multicultural, and I'm a third culture kid from the very beginning. So it's easy for me to adjust here in Hong Kong, to have friends from very different diversity groups.
And how many were in your family?
I'm one of 7 children as well.
Wow.
There are 5 of us still living. My oldest brother's in his 80s. I'm 73. So we all learned a lot from and got this legacy, I think, from my parents. So
there's some other numbers popping up. So my wife is the eldest of 7 children, and I'm the youngest of 6. And so all of these numbers keep on popping up through your conversations here. It's, 7, 7, 6. In mine, we have 3 sisters up the top and then 3 boys. And then I need to jump ahead. My mother-in-law is one of 11, and my dad is one of 14, which is bizarre. But he had 5 older brothers, 2 sisters, 5 boys, and then 2 girls. So it's 5-2, 5-2. So yeah, lots of stories. And I only got interested in writing stories because 2 of my uncles who went to World War II, 5 of the older 5 brothers all went to World War II, shot down, presumed dead, POWs, all this other stuff. But later in life, 2 of them decided to write their book, and it wasn't to be published. It was just to make sure it was captured for their children and grandchildren. And my kids know there were 5 people in uniform, but their kids will only know there were 2 because only 2 bothered to write it down. So that's what inspired me to end up writing as well, because you need to write your book for sure. Each of you, both of you, and your mother's first story.
So many stories, and you just forget. I should have started writing a long time ago, but memories do.
You can start today. Just start one page at a time.
Actually,
I think for us, the most inspiring. Go ahead.
Oh no, I was just gonna say, all 3 of you have written books, and you keep using the word story, but I think that's the one key learning for us with our family and with Mother's Choice is that we all have a story, actually. We all have a story. And I think the number one thing, we have 8 different services. We serve thousands of clients, children in the residential care system, young people who are pregnant or at risk of becoming pregnant, birth families, adoptive families. We work with the community, equipping the community around these families and children. But I think the number one thing that we've learned, and it's really the mission of Mother's Choice, is to join hands with the community to give hope and change life stories. And it's the changing life stories piece that I just wanted to highlight because oftentimes as we have more intimate conversations with people, the common thing that I hear from people is it's too late for me. My story is already, it's too dysfunctional. It's too messed up. Too many bad things have happened to me, or I've made too many bad mistakes. Like I've done bad things. And what we've learned in the 34 years of being around Mother's Choice is that it's really never too late. And there is no such thing as a hopeless case. There's hope for every single person, and even our family is not perfect, and we have our own dysfunctions.
Really?
But we've learned that it doesn't matter how many bad things have happened, that you can always change your perspective. You can always choose another path. There is redemption available for every single person. And we see it on a daily basis. We care for many children with extreme special needs or who've been exposed to a lot of trauma and abuse. We have doctors or social workers, when they're referring those children to us, that say they'll never have a family, or they'll never walk, or they'll never talk, or this young woman has been so traumatized and so abused, she'll never be able to have a normal life. She'll never be able to have healthy relationships. And we just smile and nod because we know that that isn't true. Yeah, we see miracles and that children can walk and talk. I really believe that there is a family for every child, but there is no such thing as a hopeless case. And it doesn't minimize the pain and the trauma that people have been through. It doesn't mean that their life is going to look like those things never happen, but life can be good. And there really is hope for everybody. And that's why we've been so inspired working with Oskar too on his Dear Hong Kong book, because, that was the common thread for every single person from every different country. Really different experiences and different challenges and, different lenses through which, but they all were hopeful, despite facing challenges and despite having different perspectives. So that's one thing.
You're right. Like everybody has a story, and I'm totally sure of that. But through the people that we interview in the book, we always want to pinpoint that the magic from the story, where everything happens. And I think if I have to say from Phil's story, I think we're really, really touched at that moment that you share with us, like at one point in my life, I decided to be kind to everybody. So my children, everybody around me, this concept of extended family that Alia, you put so well. And that's the beginning of everything. So, I mean, after that, we have met some members of your family. We see that happening everywhere. So you were able to make that conscious decision and then spread it and make it a legacy. And that's beautiful. That's beautiful. So inspiring.
Sometimes it's not how you feel, it's what you decide, right?
Yeah.
And I decided that's what I was going to do. So it's a decision that we can all make. It's not that it comes easy, but we can all do it. We can all help each other.
One of the best questions I kind of discovered through a guy I helped with his TEDx talk. He created a dinner series, and the whole mindset of these dinners is based on a question, which is, how can I help? And you can ask yourself that question literally, or it can be some sort of abstract thing. But you guys asked yourselves that question. That's how Mother's Choice came about. And the next day, you're off and running, and you're still going, which is amazing. But we were supporting schools in Tanzania, and it's funny how you talked about hopeless causes. Their patron, I guess, it's called the School of St. Jude, and the founder wrote her biography, an Australian lady who went over there as a maybe a teenager or early 20s. She went back there and started a school with 3 children, and it's all about fighting poverty through education. And apparently the School of St. Jude, or the St. Jude, was the patron saint of hopeless causes, which means there's no such thing as a hopeless cause. And I was reading the book in about 2007, and this was only 5 years after it had started. They had 3 children on day one, 1,100 children. I was reading it, I think 1,800 children now. And the best thing that she did in her book was that she said, look, we have 0 marketing budget. It's all word of mouth. And so, okay, I have a decent network. I can share your story. We were living in Singapore. And at the end of the book, it had her email address. And I wrote to her and said, look, this is amazing what you've been able to do. Keep up the good work. And by the way, we have a mutual friend, because she grew up in a town not too far from where I grew up. And I didn't think she would see my email or read it or reply, but I guess it was evening Singapore, morning Tanzania, and she came straight back, and we started this conversation. And if it wasn't for me reading that book, I wouldn't have gotten involved in Resolve or Music for Life or Room to Read and all these other things. So, these things compound over time when you realize you can help. And the big realization for me with Resolve was, sure, helping people in Tanzania is good, but there's people right here in Hong Kong that we can help, just as much.
Yes.
So I just want to speak to that though, Peter. Having the courage to do something, having the courage to engage with what somebody else might call a hopeless case, you have to have a sense of hope internally. And my mom may not brag on this about herself, but there's a very concrete reason why I think my siblings and I, and why I hope my children have the courage and the hope to engage with the vulnerable or the hopeless in our own communities. And I think you can cultivate hope by really practicing gratitude. And that's why I was really, I was so excited to be able to participate with my mom in this interview, Chris, when I heard about your book and gratitude space, because actually she talked about it being a decision, but actually there's a discipline around gratitude. And when you practice gratitude, there is something that changes in how you view the world. And maybe you can just share about how you did that and how that's changed us and even your grandkids.
I don't know. I have not thought about that question before.
Yes, we do it naturally.
I always think, when you're depressed or when you're feeling bad about something, I have always practiced being thankful for the trees, or, whatever circumstances, I do practice that a lot. Just changing my mindset from being worried about something or feeling bad about something. I've always had the discipline to say I'm really thankful. One of the things that I did for my children was at birthdays, you're used to receiving all these gifts, right? So we practiced in our family when it was your birthday and you got a gift from somebody, you would say, the giver would say, this is what I appreciate about you. And then the receiver would say, this is what I love about you. And I remember when the kids were little, they would say, oh, I like the skirt you're wearing. And I'd say, no, that doesn't count. You have to say what you love about your sister or what. We do the same at Christmas time. When you get a gift, you compliment each other. We do that at Thanksgiving. And we practice in our home.
Brilliant. I think I got one quick question for Phil. So I don't want to switch to Chris and get him to share his story of how he discovered gratitude as well. But how did you end up in Hong Kong?
By accident. I was on a field study. I had gotten a scholarship at the University of Hawaii at the East-West Center. And as a part of that, I was a teacher trainer for English as a second language. And as a part of that, we were there were 9 participants, and we were to go to each other's universities and study their programs. And so the first place I went to was Hong Kong, and I had arrived in Hong Kong. The only way to get to the island was on the ferry. One of the students at the university lived in Hong Kong, and she told me what to do. And I met my husband on the ferry that night.
That's crazy.
Oh, wow.
Talked me into
you mentioned that.
Down and talked me into it. And then I said, no, I've got to leave. And I went to the Philippines where one of my roommates from Hawaii had been. She was a university professor. And he called me every day, and then he went and got me in the Philippines. He said, you have to come back. So I said, I'll come back for a week. And it proceeded that way about 3 different countries where he went and brought me back. And then we got married 3 months later.
Wow.
He pursued me, basically.
Wow. That's amazing.
A few stories that I think are going to resonate here, right? They're just, first of all, how you met your wife and how you discovered gratitude and what you've done with that. I think you need to bring some of those stories out.
Thanks, Peter. Ladies, thank you so much for sharing. There was so much. I was trying to just listen and not want to participate because I was taking it all in. There were so many things. I really loved how your statement of saying people aren't hopeless. And that's just the message of letting people know this is a moment in your life. This isn't your life. I've been thinking lately about I'm working on a suicide prevention through gratitude. Right? It's this is not your life. You have. This is just a moment, and there are things to be grateful for. And, it is in my book, I talk about I'm so grateful that gratitude is a choice, that we have a choice to make. It's not something that's forced upon us. It's not just going to happen, but it's something you make a decision. It's a decision to make where you decide to basically shift focus. We had Hector Garcia, amazing author, Peter and I a couple weeks back. And I asked him what is gratitude to you? And we could see that he's very off the top. You could see what he was thinking, right? He's like, well, it's when I'm focusing on one thing that's wrong. And I have the realization there are 99 things going right. He's like, and I had this picture in my head that gratitude to him was the image of when you just shift your head. You decide to just look this direction instead of here. That's this simplistic shift. And that's where, you were saying, Phyllis, about obviously, and that is the core of gratitude. It's when things aren't always going to go right. But if we can shift, we at least get perspective into, okay, this isn't our life. This isn't the end of the world. This is just a moment. And with gratitude, it's I feel like it's like the lighthouse. So if you're in a depressive state, it's allowed you to take a breath and you see light. Maybe that's all you need in a moment. But it's about knowing it's there, right? It's about knowing that it exists. But speaking of that, just to share. So thank you for saying that. I just loved. I feel like the more we can just share with people that this is, these are moments. Your story is still being written every day. You have a decision to make what your story is going to be. Nobody decides it but yourself. It's that whole idea. If you wake up and you go, today I'm going to look for the color blue, you're going to see blue. If you wake up and go, I'm going to find things to be grateful for, you're going to find things to be grateful for. If you wake up and go, like I do, my thing, I write, today's going to be a great day. And then at the end of the day, I go, was today a great day? And I always find reasons because I'm looking for them,
Mm-hmm.
So, I feel like the more we can just share that with people, the more people hear it, eventually, it can become sticky. I talk about that in my book too. It's like these great ideas and things float around us all the time, but sometimes we're present enough where something resonates with us. And that's where my story, kind of came in 2013. My birthday's in December, and it was the fall, and I was listening to a podcast, and the podcaster said, he didn't celebrate his birthday. He said because of his family, but he said what he realized he said, if you're going to celebrate your birthday, it's like either make it about something else, like an achievement, or make it about someone else. And that's what it stuck with me, that whole someone else. And being my birthday has come by, I didn't know what I was going to do, but that stuck, right? That stickiness, right? You hear something. So, December 30th, I got up really early and I decided I was going to write my mom a gratitude letter. So it was essentially a gratitude letter. So I got up and I wrote this letter out. I typed it up. I put it on her Facebook page, and I just left it there to be a gift for her, just to surprise her. So I went about my morning, and I normally get my call from my parents, and they'd sing happy birthday to me, and I didn't get my call. So I waited a little longer, and I said, okay, well, I'm going to call my dad's cell phone number, because I want that surprise to be found. And I got my dad on the phone. He wished me happy birthday, and I thanked him, and I pivoted, and I said, Dad, had Mom read the letter? And he said that she had, and that she needed time and that she couldn't talk to me. Which, just to give you guys a little reference to that, my mom, I would have talked to her the day before, very close to her, very young age, had no problem kissing her in public and saying, I love you. So this isn't to hear someone go, she needs time. That still shocks me when I tell you, because that's not something you get when you're close to somebody for your entire life. So, we met later that day, and it just caused this, created a moment, right? And the amazing thing about sharing gratitude or writing a gratitude letter is anybody can do it. There's no magic in writing the letter, but there's magic in what it can do, and just honesty and appreciation. It can create magical moments. So that was December 30th. And I didn't know at the time that my mom's cancer was going to come back, and that 4 months to the day later, she would pass away in hospice care. So, I like to share that gratitude stacks, and just to go basically to my next section, which you guys are doing is totally stacking too, right? I mean, we want to reference in Oskar, we said it's like when you do these kind acts and when you care and you say, we're going to love everybody, we're going to accept people, we're going to help people, it all stacks. And I like using that term a lot. And so just simplistically with my story, right? I wrote a letter, that was one stack. My mom read the letter, that was another stack. My dad read the letter, it was another stack. My sister read the letter, it was another stack, right? And then people online read it as another stack. But then I had a really big stack happen because of what happened, right? My dad asked me, do you want to say anything at the funeral? And I kept thinking about this letter, and I had no desire to get up there and just be vulnerable. It's just not a place for me. But I kept thinking about this letter. So I had my cousin read the letter. So this next stack was that these letters, my words, I'm going to tell you I love you more often, I'm going to spend more time with you and make you more proud, are being read to me at my mom's funeral. And it was a very bittersweet moment, right? Because it was, when I wrote that, I didn't think this is my last birthday with my mother. And honestly, we all know that we never think that, right? We always want to believe that life's forever, but honestly, it's those moments, right? It's the moments you realize that you have these times that this so important. And through all that, and there's a lot more story there, but basically that letter's stacking right now, right? That letter's in the book, right? That letter sprung the book, which had 50 people writing in gratitude, which Peter wrote in, his daughter wrote in. It sprung Dear 2020, the book that's coming out at the end of this month, right? That's 40 other people talking about perspective in times of trouble, right? When a lot of people were saying, this is it. This is our life, right? But no, it's not. It's temporary. It's not your life. This is a moment, right? But so that's, I obviously there's a lot more story there, but that's where I'll let Peter, somebody else talk, because I want to hear more from you guys.
Yeah, I just love how, you talk about stacking. I'm a finance guy. I talk about compound. Compound interest is, eighth wonder of the world. I think compound collaboration is where a lot of magic things start to happen. And I'm sure you've collaborated continuously through Mother's Choice, right? And you keep on getting introduced to people. And that's why, Chris has been amazing, because, from a couple of WhatsApps, a day later, we're organizing a podcast, you know. So I don't know, this is like our 12th or 13th conversation. And Chris just organizes the tech, and, you know, I just throw the idea and bring in the people, but he's the one working the magic that is capturing this stuff, which to me is amazing. He's in Kentucky, here we are in Hong Kong. And, you know, even gratitude for the technology that's enabling this, right? I think we started out in Zoom. Now you've somehow got StreamYard. And, you know, amazing. So last year you thought, you know, a lot of physical events got cancelled, or travel and all that sort of stuff. But it actually accelerated a lot of the connections and a lot of the collaborations. Like, I wouldn't have gone to that gratitude and pasta dinner, which is normally a physical event in New York, if it wasn't for him turning it into a virtual event. And I was only curious about it because it had the word gratitude in it. And I kind of stumbled across the idea of gratitude through an event at General Assembly. I don't know if you ever came across that. It was kind of like night school for startups out of New York. And they brought it out to Hong Kong, and they had a bunch of interesting speakers, and I used to just go along out of curiosity. And one of the guys was Mush Panjwani, a guy who'd been living here for a number of years, and he spoke about the essence of an entrepreneur. And I thought, oh, I'll go along and have a listen. And he'd been made redundant sort of unexpectedly. You know, he was 47 or something, very good at what he did, sales, very motivational, very positive. But he decided, well, I've been made redundant, no big deal. You know, I wanted to write a book in a few years anyway, I might as well just do it now. And he started talking about how he used to get up early in the morning, go for a swim, have a good breakfast, be at his desk by 7 a.m. And he would just block from 7 a.m. till 11. And he said, you know, he reverse engineered the book, which made a big difference to me because it made it bite-sized pieces. He said, look, if you want to write a 100-page book and you want to finish it in 100 days, that means you just need to do it in you know, 1 page a day. And we interviewed him recently, and he actually said it was actually 100 some days. So it was actually over 2 years. In my mind, I thought he said 100 days, and it gets 100 days. So I tried to write a book.
The idea from once a week till every day for 100 days. That's what Peter
so
heard.
That's 2 years that it took him. But there he was holding his book.
Amazing.
And I was on a flight the next day on the way to Melbourne, and I had this notebook, and I was just making lists of things, and I was, you know, going, well, I discovered Seth Godin around the same time, and he'd been writing a blog every day for the last 20 years or something. Sometimes it's a sentence or a paragraph. And I thought, well, you know, he's always saying ship your work. I'm not going to write a blog about finance or banking and stuff. I think that'd be kind of boring. But I had that idea of Mush. The other thing he said was, you know, if you've got fresh running water in wherever you live, you're already better off than 80% of the people on the planet, something like that. So having that perspective of gratitude was what resonated. And I think I was also reading Malcolm Gladwell and his 10,000 hours. And so I put all these things together. I said, well, maybe I could do 10,000 thank yous. And, you know, you do one a day, that's actually a 27-year project. And, you know, I pause at different times. I haven't gone continuously, but I'm up to 1,300 or something like that. But if it wasn't for that discipline of looking for something good that's happening, there's no way I would have written that first book. So I did another book about 6 or 7 years ago, and I made it exactly 100 pages because, you know, Mush had set the scene. And you don't write a second book unless you've written the first book. So, you know, productive accidents wouldn't have happened. So we definitely need to work on your book, Phyllis. So that's a takeaway, you know, whatever it takes, even if it's just an essay for one of Chris's books, you know, get published in that as step one, and then gradually we'll add to that. That's why I really like how Chris has got these series of books where any unpublished author can suddenly write, 1,000 words, and they're in a book, which is a baby step towards maybe doing their own book at some stage in the future. So anyway, between you, all of your 7 children and your 6 children and my 4 children, you know, eventually we'll get them to contribute to one of Chris's books, which would be kind of fun.
I just said to my daughter, that's going to be your job.
Yeah. I can help with that. I'll go and interview each of you and bring out some of the stories. That would be a fun project.
I think in my case, when when Peter was talking about introducing me to Chris and his story and the possibility of doing something here in this space, I resonated a lot with it. And then I was thinking, why is it so much? And I never actually thought about it. But then the whole Dear Hong Kong project is based on gratitude. It's our own personal gratitude for the city we live in. Then the built-in or compound gratitude for the people that we interview, because they're sharing their stories and they're touching our lives and changing our lives in a way. And the gratitude of everybody in the book as well for the city they love. No? So I think it's a commonality. And also the gratitude we have to the volunteers, because it's a volunteer project. So it's a lot of people putting their time and effort and skills into something that is bringing them intangibles. It's somehow, like making them happier and making us happy. So I wanted to ask you both, because this is a question we ask in the book. If you had to write a letter to Hong Kong, what would the first words be? What would be in that letter?
I think, I don't know if you heard about our Great Diaper Miracle. When was it? How long ago was this?
In January.
In January, we discovered that the company that always gives us all of our diapers said that they had to put a pause on it. And when we checked our supply, we only had less than 2 weeks of diapers. Now we use hundreds of thousands of diapers, right? So Alia got out on the internet and said, we need diapers. And you want to tell them the story, how many we got? And
oh yeah, well, we thought we've had diaper shortages before in the past, and it wasn't me, it was some of my awesome teammates just put together a little postcard, and we printed it out and we put it on our doors in our childcare home, and we posted it on our Facebook pages, and we thought, maybe my sister or her book club will send in a few. You know what I mean? Like we really thought maybe we'll get a few packs of diapers, maybe from the volunteers. We don't have that many followers on Facebook, so we didn't really expect to have a lot of response. But we've been overwhelmed with gratitude. It was January 7th that we put up that postcard. We've seen a lot of trauma and hardship since this whole COVID thing, and before that, social unrest here in Hong Kong with the clients that we serve. We've seen more rape, more abuse, more complexity with the children and young women that we serve. Everybody is under a lot more stress. The vulnerable have become more vulnerable, and yet we're filled with so much hope in 2021. And I think the Diaper Miracle is just an example. We were expecting maybe 5 people to respond, but thousands of people responded. I think our Facebook post was shared 132,000 times.
Wow.
It was, and retweeted by kind of the major who don't even follow us, so I don't know quite how it happened. But literally thousands and thousands of people, and they weren't rich people. They weren't. Like individual people came, little old ladies and young families or new moms and people's neighborhood group or book club or whatever came and brought their 1 or 2 or 3 bags of diapers and wipes, and they wrote notes. I'm going to start crying if I think about the notes that they wrote to us, but just saying that they wanted to help. And there was, I remember one new mom who came with her baby, and she said, I really don't have a lot of extra, but I thought I buy diapers for my baby, so I'm just going to bring half of what I bought for my baby at the supermarket this week. I'm going to come and I'm going to give it. And it added up to like 2 years worth of diapers, more than that. Well, we didn't have places. I'm not going to turn the camera around, but there's diapers under all of our desks and in all of our shelves here. It just was such a reminder to me that when you think you're alone, when you think all hope is lost, when you don't know how you're going to move forward, actually there are people who do want to help, and sometimes there are people you don't even know, and actually when people have that willingness to be grateful for what they have, so that, because you need that to want to share with somebody else. When people have that gratitude for what they have, and they bring even their little thing, because it's not always just diapers or wipes. When people are willing to say, I'm willing to give what I have, added together, that can be a lot. And so the Great Diaper Miracle of 2021, that's what we call it here. I think it's really a metaphor for the whole story of Mother's Choice. It's a story for our lives, and we haven't shared our own personal stories, but we've had to overcome our own tragedy and heartbreaks too, but it's not about having a perfect life or having all the resources or having everything all together, all lined up. But when you're grateful and you can see from a different perspective and you bring the little piece that you have, you actually can make a difference. And making a difference in even one person's life can end up changing the whole world.
So we had so many diapers come. There were truckloads from supermarkets, or that they just took all the inventory and gave it to us. And I remember coming down on the Board Road where we have an office. There were 4 truckloads standing in line, and I wept because the driver said, "Well, my boss told me to give you 10 packets, but I bought 2 as well." And I just wept the whole day as they were bringing these diapers. We didn't know what to do with them. They filled our offices, we had to find a place to store them in the end. But I was talking about gratitude. For me, you work in an office, you work with trauma, you work with babies, and there's a lot of volunteers, but you think, who really cares? And at that point, I just said, Hong Kong responded. And I was so grateful. And I cried for 3 days because those diapers kept coming in. Crying is what we're going to do with them, who's going to sort them out, small, medium, large. But I was really grateful for Hong Kong. They stepped up to the plate and have been there for us. And I was really grateful. It's quite an experience.
So what's next for Mother's Choice, and how can we help?
Yeah, that's a great question, Peter. Even though this is a season of great uncertainty for the world, and not just Hong Kong, I think for the United States, for every country in the world, there's great uncertainty. And obviously there's financial uncertainty, but we feel that this is the time for us to step up and do more. This is the time. This isn't the time to hold back because we're not sure where the money is going to come from. This is a time for us to do more. So we're actually expanding our services this year, which I realize sounds crazy, but actually it's in adversity. That's the story of how we got started, is willing to step up even when you don't know where it's going to come from. We are expanding our services for our single moms who choose parenting. We support women no matter what choice they make, and single teen moms are extremely vulnerable. And so one of our new programs is really building a network of volunteers and community support around them so their kids don't end up in the foster care or orphanage system here. The second thing that we're really expanding in this season is our early intervention work. There is a really long wait list for children with special needs. And with schools being shut down, with hospitals being more restricted, and with more and more, especially drug use, with kids who are in the system, there's just the need for early intervention therapies has really increased. So we're expanding our early intervention care. We're also expanding our outreach for young women who are vulnerable. We work with girls as young as 12 to 25 is our kind of focus, and really being available and exploring how we can use technology to be where they're at, because they've become more isolated with everything that's happening in the world. So yeah, we're planning to do more, and we really hope that people will consider engaging with us. You can give financially, we always need money, but it's more than just money. I think really educating yourself on what's happening, really learning more, and ultimately considering volunteering, whether it's as a foster parent or using your professional skills. There's many different ways to volunteer. So we really encourage people just to come and learn more. We host information sessions about the challenges that that our city face every month. And we say, even if you don't want to financially support or volunteer with Mother's Choice, please come along and learn more, even if it inspires you to help anybody, because I think anybody who's working with the vulnerable in any community right now needs more help. So come and educate yourself, learn more, and we hope that
when do you do those? Like, when is your next information session? Where do you do those?
Oh, man. I wish I'd looked that up before we did this call.
It's okay.
We host them every month, and we post it on our website, which is www.motherschoice.org. And yeah, we do it on Zoom now, so anybody can dial in, and we really encourage, there's no obligation, like you can just come and learn.
I'd like to join one of those. I think info sessions, generic info sessions, are really powerful because it just plants a seed and may not happen immediately, but at some stage, something, someone will be able to work out a way to contribute. So by chance, I met one of your pretty involved volunteers, is the Wall family. So Rob, I met years ago through a tennis buddy, and I've been staying in touch with all their work, which is amazing.
Yeah. Well, once you get involved, especially in welcoming a child into your own home, fostering will change your life. So, I mean, that's one thing that I would just consider people, even my husband and I, we used to think it's something that we couldn't do because we have a lot of our own kids. We're both CEOs. We both work full time. We can't do it, and for my husband, his biggest concern was saying goodbye. When you're a foster parent, you're really a temporary parent, and you can love that child, but that child's going to be adopted or go back to their birth family. And so you have to be prepared for the grief. And he thought we could never do it, but it's actually something, we've learned that your hearts can be expanded. You can give so much more than you ever thought. And the Wall family, I think, are an amazing example of opening their home and their hearts again and again as a whole family. Their kids are as committed as the parents are to welcoming children into their own home. So yeah, I think their lives have been changed as much as the many children that they've hosted.
And then the other great Hong Kong story that I kind of discovered again through Creative Mornings, I think it was Impact Hong Kong and Jeff Rotmeyer and all he's been doing for homeless people, which is amazing. So yeah, there's a lot of good things going on. I think we're at the hour, so unless Chris, Oskar, you want to have some closing comments?
I just want to say, because you've been talking about the volunteer and the benefits of fostering the foster family or volunteering for the organization. Quoting Peter in his Productive Accidents book, volunteering is a superpower. And when I was reading it, yes, it's it is. If you take it as such, it's something that it will enrich you personally and will open up different possibilities, because you're tuning into something that you really like and you find is meaningful. So anything coming up from there, it would be good. So
I think of it as it just levels the playing field, right? Because it doesn't matter who you are, where you're from, you're all thinking about the same idea, or you all care about the same cause, and that's where a lot of interesting things start to happen. And so the long story was we ended up sponsoring a child in that school in Tanzania, and then we got a newsletter saying, they're going back to Australia because 90% of their donors were from Australia, because that's where she started the school, started the idea. And I just said, well, you've got to fly via Asia somehow. Why don't you come into Singapore and stay with us, and I'll organize a few events. And again, we didn't know what type of events we were going to organize, but 3 international schools hosted her, colleagues at work, and a friend who had an art gallery did 2 evening events. And the response that she got was so good that whenever they fly through Asia, they stay with us, or, they've come to Hong Kong. We've had a Maasai tribal guy stay with us, Felix Malel, when I went over to Tanzania and he picked me up at the airport. That was kind of surreal that, these adventures happen while you're helping other people as well, right? And it makes your life, that much richer. So that's what I really got out of volunteering. And, hearing John Wood's story as well of how, he's hiking in Nepal and goes into a library that doesn't have any books. And the guy just challenges him, maybe you can do something. And so he, next time he's at an internet cafe, he encourages all his friends back in the US to drop off books at his parents' garage. And a few months later, they have a ship's containers full. And he and his dad drop them off, to some remote village in Nepal. And fast forward, John and I are pretty good friends, and he wrote the foreword to my book, which is, again, surreal. So these connections, imagine if you didn't volunteer, what have you missed out on? So much, stuff that has made life so much better. So keep up the great work. Thank you for everything that you're doing. And thank you for getting up early on a Monday public holiday morning. This is a big effort from everyone, I think. So really appreciate your time and learning more about your story and what you've been able to do.
There's one last thing. We're going to have this book launch on Thursday at the Asia Society. So Phil is going to be speaking there. Thank you so much.
Amazing. I want to be there.
In the audience, John Wood is going to be in the audience. Also, there will be people connecting through Zoom. So Chris, if you're more than invited, I will share with you the details. So we're very happy because after publishing the book in December, we have the opportunity now to do a celebration and do a book launch.
Yeah, so, Asia Society is great. We went there for the other book that is The Gift of Reading, right, which is also in support of Room to Read. So yeah, amazing to see these compounding collaborations continue.
I wanted to say something out before we close out here. I just wanted to say that, speaking about being a service, I feel like to be a catalyst for gratitude, the easiest way to do that is just being kind to somebody. And when you show up for somebody and you're like, I'm here for you, and you let them know you see them, you're creating an atmosphere for gratitude to exist. And that's what kindness does. And when somebody volunteers, so many great things are happening there, right? Because they're creating this atmosphere. At the same time, when you focus on somebody else, you stop thinking about your problems. At that moment, that's that directional turn we were talking about, right? Like, as soon as you're with somebody and you're with them, like at that moment, like you're in the moment and you're not lost up here in monkey mind problems. This person has literally just helped you switch that. You have to have the person that's your gauge to switch to being present, to allowing you to drop all that baggage. And I love that story you guys shared at the end so much, because I feel like it brought full circle. 34 years ago, we said, we want to help people. And then a day later, there's somebody on your door. And then a day later, there's a baby. There's two, and then you fast forward 34 years later and you've helped all these people and you have all these people and you just put a call out and go, we're short on diapers. And then bam, and then you just have this beautiful story of, I think people do want to help. People do care, right? And it's like you gave them. So the amazing thing is, like, you gave people an opportunity to be of service, right? And at the same time, it changed you all, obviously, because you're in this process of serving these other people. And it's just like this big mass. Your story was just so beautiful. You think you all start 34 years ago, these few people, the little idea, somebody shows up 34 years later, you've helped all these people and you just go, we're shy. And then truckloads of diapers show up. Like, it's just full of hope. Like, when people want to look around and go, the world's gone to blah, 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 I go, no. That's not the way it is. It's what you want to focus on. So any given day, we get to choose. It's like the Dear 2020. It's like, we get to choose, what are we focusing on? I want to focus on the diapers showing up at your all's charity. That's what I want to focus on. So thank you for, and all your stuff, you shared beautiful things, but I'm going to remember that story so much because it just encapsulates so well just the beautiful atmosphere and the love that Hong Kong and you all have. So thank you for that so much.
Thanks. It's a privilege being with you all. You all are visionaries of how we can help change happen. And we share that in common, and it encourages us to do more too. What can we do that's even more? So thank you so much for this today.
I'm looking forward to meeting Victoria, the founder of Resolve. She's coming around this afternoon for afternoon tea. We're getting to meet her first baby, Estella, which is going to be pretty cool. So yeah, good fun. Looking forward to that.
Thanks.
Look forward to going to your info session as well. That'll be really good.
I want to do that too. So make sure somebody gets me. Maybe Peter can share that with me.
Yeah, because it's on Zoom. And Oskar, for your book launch at Asia Society, that's going to be amazing.
All right. Well, hey, everybody. I'm Chris, the Gratitude Space. Same for everybody. Just remind everybody to stay grateful. We've got some great books that we flashed, and we're going to have Mother's Choice with the website will be in the show notes. So if you guys want to reach out, and like I said, if you just want to show up for the Zoom thing, I think that's amazing. Or if you want to support them in any way, just happy we could put something together to share the organization, and we all got to share. And that's it. So I'm Chris, Gratitude Space Radio, just saying we are